So I'm just taking a short break from working on the granny flat to come and fix a water leak issue. We've literally just come into spring, and over the winter period we had an awful lot of rain, and we've always found that when we've had a really major downpour of rain, we've got a small dribble sort of leak that comes through the garage area. The garage area in this instance is also what's going to be my man cave area. My daughter's currently using it as a bedroom whilst we get all the granny flat stuff sorted out, and in the research I've been doing on how to fix the problem, there seems to be lots of people who have similar problems to this, but very few people either know how to fix it or had a solution for it. And I'm just basically going to go over what I've come up with. You can see the affected area that I'm working on here. I've had some creeping moisture that's come up the wall there, and unfortunately that sort of travelled up into the area where my daughter has painted a mural on the wall, and I've had to trim that back fairly severely because there's some mould developing in the plaster, and it's not something I want to keep in the environment when she's sleeping out here at the moment. You can see in the corner there, that's largely where the water issue has come from, and you can probably see there how damp the dust is where I've been drilling to investigate where the water's coming from. Essentially it's been coming out of that corner and it's been weeping off in one direction and then weeping off down the side wall here as well. As a result, it's affected all the tiles that were here. The capillary action of the water has slowly migrated under those vinyl tiles, and it's sort of melted all the glue that holds them down. Luckily enough, I've got a few extra packets I'll be able to replace them with, and we're thinking about tiling the floor out here anyway when it's all finished up for the man cave setup. So to talk about how I've worked out what the problem is and how I'm fixing it, I've first got to show you how to find the problem. First got to work out where the water's coming from. I've done that. And then you've got to work out why the water's coming through. What's happened in this instance is that when they laid the slab down, they then built a brick edge off that slab, and that transition between the slab and the bricks is what is effectively the wet line in this building. From what I can gather, this building was probably built somewhere around the mid to late 50s, and since then at some point somebody on the outside has allowed the earthwork to build up above that wetline area, and then unfortunately somebody's come along and concreted over the top of that. So how to fix it and how to work out whether or not that's the issue. You can see the drill holes that I have there. I've started at ground level and gone progressively further and further up. That tells me two things. It tells me whether or not the bricks are wet, and it also tells me where the wet line is. The wet line obviously here is where the bricks meet the concrete, and on the outside you need to establish that same position. So effectively what I've done is to start at the bottom and then go outside and see if I can see where that hole has come out. If I can't see that long drill bit poking out the wall, I know that I'm below ground level, and that's where all these problems start. So you can see there, hole by hole, how I've crept up to that last hole, and you can see that that's almost 3 bricks above ground level on the outside. So that simply means that any water that's sort of sheeting down the property hits the wall there, and the wall basically just acts as a dam, and it'll find wherever the cracks are between those bricks and the concrete floor, and it just slowly seeps in continuously. And then obviously the heavier the rain, the worse it is and the longer it lasts. We can have situations where the rain has stopped for 2 or 3 days and it still slowly keeps on seeping in. Let's go on the outside and I'll show you what I'm doing to fix it. Okay, so here we are. You can see there by the paint line how much dirt and concrete I've had to sort of excavate out of there to get it to the right position. And you can see by that chalky line at the base of the bricks, that's what constitutes the position of the slab. I've dug probably 10 or 15 centimeters down past the edge of the slab, and I've done that all the way along the edge of the building. So this is where they sort of tried to put a concrete drain to drain the water off, and that sort of works well enough for anything that's surface water, but anything that's groundwater is basically just going to find that seam line and just come straight into the building. So what I'm going to do now is establish a new wet line that ends up being higher than the slab itself. Okay, so on to fixing it. So if I was to backfill that with concrete and soil now, we'd basically still have the same problem. The water would sort of make its way up through the concrete and go through that line. And that's why I've cut the line here. That's going to be my new wet line area. So to establish that, what I'm using is this snakeskin sort of flashing plastic. This is normally used for around windows and doors, and it has a texture on it, which is why they call it that snakeskin sort of finish. I've got a small piece cut there as a measuring stick so you can see what I'm going to do with it. This is our old seam point that we have to fill in. So what I'm doing with that plastic piece is that will cover past the old line. Once I've got that attached to the wall, I can fold over that little bit there and tuck it into that cut, and that will have any water that sheets down will sheet over the plastic and into the soil that way and not go anywhere near where that seam line is. Now this on its own is not good enough. The pattern that is sort of impregnated into this is designed in such a way to sort of cut down on capillary action so that the water doesn't sort of seep in. But to be doubly sure that that's not an issue, I'm going to go along and wire brush this seam line, and then I'm going to use a specialised product for this type of thing. This is a Sikaflex product that's designed specifically for this sort of issue. It's also used as a glue, but in this instance I'm using it for the joins. And because it's not solvent based, unlike silicone, it doesn't have like a greasiness to it, which means it actually bonds and soaks into the concrete surface, so it grips really well as well and forms a really nice tight seal. Once that's done, I can put the plastic over that, backfill against that, and that'll effectively give me that new wet line that's way above where it was previously. The line that I've cut in here too is only probably about 1 centimetre deep. So it's not enough to compromise the structural strength of the brick in any way. This doesn't need to be pretty, I just need to sort of force it into the crack that's there. I want to make sure that it's got a good skin over the top of it. Once it's skinned up and it's become a little bit more solid, I'll go over and check it again and touch up any spots that may have little air bubbles and stuff in it. That's it, pretty much all patched up. I've gone up the wall wherever there's any sort of suspect sort of cracks or potential holes in the brickwork as well. That's the black plastic put in place. You can see there now how I've got that tucked into that join. I'll go over that now and add in that same sealant that I was using for the join. You can see there now how that forms a protective skirt that sits below where the original wet line is, which means I can backfill that area again for plastic now. And theoretically, if I wanted to, I could even build it up as high as sort of just underneath the nails there and still have plenty of water protection. I'm not going to be going anywhere near that high, but it does sort of show you what sort of water protection it would have.